Hello, welcome to Meet Me at the Movies. I'm Noel T. Manning II, hanging out with Thomas Manning, and we are talking cinema. And Thomas got an early screening of another one of these Marvel films, man. It's like a Marvel film every other day. I'm exaggerating slightly, but Ant-Man is back on the big screen. Antman and Wasp. Is it officially called Ant-Man and the Wasp, colon, Quantumania? Is that the name of it officially?
You are exactly right. Yeah, you are down to the last detail. That's exactly how it's typed out.
Well, I think this is Scott Lang's with Paul Rudd, acting. Is this his fourth appearance on screen as Ant-Man, or is it like his fifth or sixth? Do you know how many times he's been on?
So I think five times. So of course the Ant-Man trilogy, which this is, the third one of that trilogy. But then also he was in Civil War and he was in Endgame.
Okay.
So that's five. We might be missing one. I'm not sure, but I know it's at least five.
He was also in What If, but that's kind of the spin-off thing. So, but I got to say, Paul Rudd, absolutely love Paul Rudd. When I first saw him on screen as Ant-Man, it was one of these films that I really wasn't excited about until I knew Paul Rudd was attached to it, and he perfected it in a way that just felt so dang fun. And the first film in particular, and also his contribution to Endgame, those are like two of my favorite incarnations of Ant-Man on screen. Let me get your thoughts on this one, because this is starting kind of a new phase in Marvel, or taking us in a new direction, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So we recently had an announcement a few months ago that the next big Avengers films that we're building to are the Avengers Kang Dynasty and Avengers Secret Wars, and that's coming in like 2025. And so Kang the Conqueror, played by Jonathan Majors, and he's a really interesting character because there are multiple variations, multiple portrayals of this character throughout the multiverse. We kind of got our first glimpse of him back in 2021 in the season finale of Loki, as he was known as He Who Remains, which is kind of, he is a variant of Kang, but he was a much more benevolent, or I would say, much more benevolent character than Kang the Conqueror, who all he wants to do is conquer. That's all he wants to do. And so this, in Quantumania, this is our first real look at Kang the Conqueror. And I'll say...
So he wants to conquer, kind of like your mom. Anytime your mom is around, she just wants to conquer things. It's Beth the Conqueror. So
yeah,
I got it.
I couldn't have said it better. Yeah. So yeah, I'll say Kang is definitely as advertised. Jonathan Majors, he's just a treat to watch in any film or television project, and you just can't take your eyes off the characters that he embodies on screen. And as I was watching this, I found myself thinking, oh man, I really can't wait for Creed 3, which is coming out in a couple weeks. Michael B. Jordan's directorial debut. But ultimately, I think that tells you my overall reactions to this film. The fact that I found myself thinking about Creed 3 and Jonathan Majors more than Quantumania. I loved pretty much everything Jonathan Majors did in this film, but there wasn't a whole lot beyond that to keep me gripped.
Well, I kind of hate that, because you and I both are fans of Paul Rudd as Ant-Man. What do you feel the problems were? Because it sounds like Majors was the only thing that kind of drew you into it. And you and I talked off camera, and he didn't really show up in pure essence until the last half or last hour of the film.
Yeah, pretty much the last. Yeah, it's only 2 hour film, and it's the last hour when we really get a good look at him. And this is one of the strangest story structures I've seen in a Marvel movie. And I think here's a good comparison. If this was a symphony, imagine if the symphony was either a beat behind or a beat ahead every time there was supposed to be a big, exciting crescendo or a quiet and reflective emotional moment. That the tempo was just off the whole time. And another crucial character in this movie is the character of Cassie Lang, Ant-Man's daughter. But this was an actress who we've never seen play the character before, Catherine Newton. She's a good actress, but in the first two Ant-Man movies, we had the young actress Abby Ryder-Fortson, who was excellent. And then we had the time jump in Endgame, and we had Emma Furman in just a couple scenes in Endgame, and she made a huge impact and had very beautiful on-screen chemistry with Paul Rudd in terms of that very believable father-daughter relationship. But here she was recast with Catherine Newton, and I was talking to my friend Andrew about it, who went to the screening with me, and we think she was recast in an attempt to bring more comedy to the character, because Paul Rudd himself is so funny. But the thing is, comedy is so difficult to just to nail on the head, and the grammar of Paul Rudd's comedy is so hard to match, and the tempo of the emotional beats that I was talking about earlier. I think they would have been in better rhythm if the Cassie Lang character had been written and directed more consistently to elicit that pathos. And I feel like they used her primarily to fit that Paul Rudd humor mold, and her actual emotional characterization was more of a secondary priority.
Well, comedy in itself, it's a language all to its own, and just because you know the words to speak doesn't mean you can eloquently deliver the comedy. I mean, comedy is not just about what's about the actual words that are spoken, but it's how you present those words, and also how they can play along, especially if you have other characters, how they play with other characters. And to me, you don't need to have another Paul Rudd. But, in a film, Paul Rudd in his character, especially in Ant-Man, he's enough. He's absolutely enough. Now, if you can find some great supporting characters to help that, as we did see, especially in the heist, in that first one, some of that supporting cast really worked well with him. That core group worked well, but that's not always the case. And so when you try to force it, sometimes you can have problems.
Yeah, and so much of the magic of the first two Ant-Man movies was his, the friends surrounding him, the ex-cons, as, they created a business called Ex-Con, which was hilarious, a great play on words. But, so you had Michael Pena, and then David Dastmalchian, and then T.I., and just their energy bouncing off of each other was just the perfect, it was just really in perfect stride. And but none of those characters are in this film at all, other than I think there might be a couple flashbacks where we see them, but that's it. And I found myself really missing, the days when it was just Paul Rudd and his buddies teaming up for basically a heist adventure. And there are some elements of this which are similar to a heist, but it's a heist with much greater stakes, and stakes that it's hard to connect with on an emotional level just because they are so outside of the territory of what we're used to with Ant-Man. And the whole movie, the whole central theme is looking out for the little guy, which I love that, but it gets too expansive too quickly for you to really connect with the little guy in this movie.
So it sounds like there were quite a few issues you had with it: character chemistry, the editing, pacing, and maybe even the direction for this one as well. It sounds like all of those things kind of combined to maybe not make this as a top Marvel film. Is this one you're probably not going to go back and see over and over and over again?
Yeah, I'd be interested to go back and see it. I know you haven't seen it yet, so I'd like to see your reaction and watch it with you. And you speak of the direction, I do have to give credit to Peyton Reed. He's actually the first MCU director to finish out the trilogy with a character, and he did a great job with the first two Ant-Man movies, and he's done some great work on The Mandalorian. He really is a great filmmaker, but I just think that he was just ultimately juggling too much with this movie, and fell out of pace with his objective. And so I was fairly disappointed with Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Although, if you want to go watch it, if you're going to see it for Jonathan Majors, then you're not going to be let down, because he brings everything that I was hoping to see with his character. So I think overall for Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, I'll give it a C+, and which, hate to say, but that's where I'm sitting with it.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
C+, just a little over average for this MCU film. Yet another in this continuing saga of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Well, Thomas, let's talk about this series that you and I have been watching on HBO Max. You can watch it on HBO as well. It's called The Last of Us. It is, speaking of, you talked about The Mandalorian. Speaking of The Mandalorian, he shows up, without the helmet, of course, and the series The Last of Us, which is adapted from a video game, and there's some really interesting storytelling in this series that's a few episodes in. And let's get some of your thoughts on this, and then I'll give you some of mine as well.
Yeah, so I don't have any familiarity with the source material, but so Neil Druckmann, who was the showrunner for the series, was the creator of the video game. So I think having someone who's that entwined with the source material is very important in adapting something. And I think it's funny that Pedro Pascal always seems to find himself responsible for the safety of a child who could save the world. That's the formula we have here, and the child in question is Bella Ramsey, or played by Bella Ramsey, who we've had her on the show before, talking about Catherine Called Birdie. She was in a coming-of-age film last year, and we also know her from Game of Thrones, and where she played Lyanna of Mormont, and she just exhibited such a strength and such a almost a coldness about her. Someone who very small in stature but very mighty in spirit, and I think she also takes a lot of that energy and puts it into this role. And throughout each of the first 3 episodes, you feel like you're exploring the story and this world through a different lens each time. First episode is pretty action-packed. The second episode is mostly just characters walking and talking, but getting to know them better. And then there's a big action set piece at the climax. And then the third episode is this anthology story about a pair of characters adjacent to the main characters, but we don't really know how they know each other. And this anthology is basically a home life drama in the midst of an apocalyptic wasteland. So very fascinating structure here. And at this point, I have only seen the first 3 episodes, but I believe there's going to be 9 total. And it's really fun to go into this not knowing anything about the ultimate destination for the story, and just kind of going in ready for whatever they want to throw at me.
It is a post-apocalyptic series that looks at the world when a virus has taken over, and the virus or the fungus creates zombies. And we've seen so many zombie-type movies and TV shows, and when these come out, you find yourself wondering, how can it be different? How can we see something that's different that's going to bring us into this world? And I think they do a fascinating job doing that. In The Last of Us, as you mentioned, it's the storytelling techniques that I think really work and really make this kind of go beyond just the don't let the zombies bite you kind of thing. And we do have that. We do see that. And these are definitely some different types of zombies that we haven't quite seen in a while, unless, of course, you played the video game from 2013. But I'm finding myself really intrigued by this. I love the character chemistry, and fans of Fringe, the TV series, will find a notable that shows up in this as well. And fans of Parks and Rec are going to find a different kind of Ron Swanson showing up in one of these episodes too, unlike anything you've ever seen before. And I'm really enjoying this for what it is, Thomas. And because I've seen so many post-apocalyptic films and series, and I've seen so many variations of it, it's hard for me to bring this to that kind of A+ rating because there's so much of that baggage behind me. But it is very solid. The set designs, all the technical aspects, the sound design, the monsters themselves, all that really does work well. And the character chemistry between the two is solid. It's just so solid, and it speaks volumes to me. I'm really enjoying this. Any other thoughts before you give a rating and before we go to the break?
Just the really subtle music, a lot of acoustic guitar, just really sets that tone of wandering through a wasteland of dead grass and fallen cities. It's mostly. I mean, really, the only music that stood out to me that I can remember is just simple guitar strums, but it's so beautifully done. And I think based on my limited knowledge of the game, I think we do get to see the characters actually like learn to play the guitar, that kind of thing, and that actually becomes a big part of their characterization later on. Just early on, that's something that's kind of stuck with me.
Yep. So what is your rating for The Last of Us?
Right now, I'll give The Last of Us a solid A minus, and it has been renewed for a second season already. So I want to throw that out there as well.
Yep. And I am at a B plus for The Last of Us. You can find that on HBO Max. When we come back from the intermission, Thomas is going to give us a quick take for the film, the Will Smith film, Emancipation. And also we're going to have an interview with one of the cast members for that. So stick around after this quick intermission. We'll be right back.
Won't you come and meet me at the movies? Won't you come and watch it?
Hello, welcome back to Meet Me at the Movies. Noel T. Manning II with Thomas Manning, talking cinema. We talked about Antman, Quantumania before, Antman and Wasp, Quantumania before the break. We also talked about The Last of Us, a series that you can find on HBO Max. And Thomas, there's a film called Emancipation that has not gotten a lot of awards love and stars Will Smith, and I think that's probably one of the reasons why. There are a lot of folks who have a hard time getting past the slap, the Oscar slap with Chris Rock almost a year ago now. But this is a film that I think any other time would have gotten much more awards love.
Yeah, most definitely. Like, that's a conversation I really don't want to have with anybody at all, but I am pretty confident in saying that if not for what happened last year, that this film would have been a contender for at least a handful of awards, especially in technical categories. Even if not Best Actor or Best Picture, I still think Best Production Design, Costume Design, Cinematography, Sound Design, and these are the types of films, these period epics. This is a Civil War drama. Those are the ones that very commonly attract that awards attention, and I know Apple TV Plus was very looking forward to seeing this presented to the world, presented to the cinematic landscape. But then everything happened how it did, and I feel like they kind of just quietly dropped it and did very little to promote it outside of a couple press tours here and there. But yeah, it's almost like they were just kind of hoping that nobody would get a look at this.
But you got a chance to take a look at it, and you did that really in preparation for the interview with Charmaine Bingwa, who we're going to have on the show. You got a chance to do that interview a little earlier, but give us your take on Emancipation as you were prepping for that interview.
Yeah, so Charmaine Bingwa plays the character who's the wife of Will Smith's character Peter, and this is based on a real life man who was an escaped slave, and he's set on doing everything he can to return to his wife and children after he's separated from them. And no matter what sacrifices he has to make along the way, it's that love he has for his family that just continues to drive him. And the opening scene of the film conveys that unbreakable love that attaches to his family, and we as the audience are just holding on to that scene for the entire runtime of the film. It's 2 hours and 15-minute film, but I think it's paced very well, and you're pretty much you're carried along Will Smith's journey, his character's journey the whole time. Pretty much the majority of the film is seen through his eyes, outside of the occasional cutbacks to his family in a different part of the world, and just that balance between their perspectives and how we as the audience connect with that relationship is very powerfully constructed, and keeps you in line with the pace of the whole film and what you're feeling for these characters' emotions.
Thomas, I absolutely loved the cinematography in this, and Oscar winner Robert Richardson involved in that and bringing it to life. And one of the things that I thought was interesting was just kind of that muted color, almost black and white, right on the edge of that, and it did so in such a beautiful way in telling the story. You mentioned, and I think you mentioned Antoine Fuqua, who directed this, and I got to say, visually just amazing, astounding picture, and I know that that would have gotten some awards love if given the chance, and if the studio had promoted that and marketed that.
Yeah, Robert Richardson has an incredible, pedigree to his name as a cinematographer, and this is another one. And when you read his intent with the saturation here, really interesting hearing him talk about he didn't want to be completely in black and white because he wanted certain colors to bleed through. Sometimes the reds and the oranges and the greens. So almost to elicit this response from the audience that this is in fact very real, and it's not something that's like way, way, way back in history. It's something that is still connected to a lot of issues that we're having in our world today, and that the nation and the world is still finding ways to deal with the aftermath of the just terrible atrocities of slavery and the Civil War.
Well, Thomas, we want to make sure we get this interview in. Want to make sure you give your rating for this movie. It's called Emancipation. You can find it on Apple TV Plus. What is your rating for this?
Yeah, solid B+ for Emancipation, and I'll definitely recommend you watch it. It's on Apple TV Plus, and it's there readily available for anybody to watch.
For me, solid B+ as well. It's visually stunning, and the performances are wonderful in this, and it is a film that will make you think. It will also make you do some research, and that's something that I really appreciated about that as well. We're going to go to this interview, Thomas, that you did with Charmaine Bingwa, and then we'll be right back to wrap up the show right here on Meet Me at the Movies.
De nou fek, ven ici, yo pousse pou yo chanje nou. Yo chanje non nou. Yo chanje langaj nou. Yo même essayé pou yo chanje ki moun nou ye.
Hey Charmaine, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful, and I really appreciate you taking the time for this. I'm really honored to be talking with you about Emancipation. And I want to ask first off about the opening scene of this film, which is such a powerful sequence, and it lays the emotional foundations for this family that we care so deeply for. And, with very little dialogue, there's this lifetime of love that's conveyed in that moment between Peter and his family. So, what stood out to you about filming that moment on set, and what has stayed with you in the time since then?
I love how you say a lifetime of love. That's beautifully phrased, and that's really what we were going for. It's and it's kind of a spiritual, universal love. I mean, it was really important to set up that this family just needed to stay together. How precious they were to each other, and weirdly, I remember things like a little shaft of light that beautifully came through the window, and also humorously, Will washing my feet as well was definitely something I didn't expect would happen in my lifetime.
Right, yeah, that's I'm sure not many people can say that Will Smith has washed their feet before, so
That's true.
that's wonderful. And in your portrayal of Dodie Yen, she's this mother figure with such an incredible resolve and strength about her. So did that lead you to reflect or think of anybody from your own life that has impacted you in a similar way?
Yeah, I think many people, but I think it's definitely a personal story for me, because it definitely reminded of her. She reminded me of my own mother, who sacrificed deeply and greatly just so her family could have a better life than herself. And it just, I wanted the role to be an ode to all strong Black women out there who are often unsung heroes. And it was interesting as part of my preparation was I really wanted to hear stories from enslaved people themselves to make sure I was, accurate and reflecting what actually happened. And I had this moment where one of the last stories I read before I went to bed was the story of an enslaved woman who was beaten terribly, so terribly she wasn't able to open her jaw because she misplaced her mistress's cutlery. And what actually happened was I started to feel some of the experiences these women felt from all those stories that I absorbed. And I felt I woke up with my jaw stuck myself, and I could feel the pain and the stuckness and the voicelessness, and it really helped me to empathize with the character.
Wow, well, thank you so much for sharing that. And This kind of goes along those same lines. And I don't know if you can recall specifically the first time that you ever saw the famous photo of Peter, but if you can remember generally, did you find that your emotions surrounding that photograph to evolve or even deepen based on your experience with this film?
Oh gosh, yes. I remember I came across the photograph because I was preparing to do a play called Doubt a Parable in Australia, and it really struck me and stayed with me. But like many people I speak to, I didn't know the story behind it. So when I got the script, I read it twice immediately, and I was so enthralled by this one man's journey and how his ability and his being brave was able to inspire a whole civil rights movement that helped us be at a more equitable place today.
Well, Charmaine, I know you have a very busy day today, but I really do appreciate your time and fitting me into your schedule, and I was very moved by your performance in Emancipation, and I'll be tuning into any of your future films and projects, and hopefully we get a chance to speak again sometime in the future.
I appreciate you, and it's so lovely to speak to you. Thank you.
Thomas, great interview. Really enjoyed that, and so thanks for bringing that to us, man. Any final thoughts about her and about the interview with her you want to make sure you share before we wrap up the show?
She was just so incredibly kind and gracious with her time, and I know in those long press days where you're doing 5-minute slots for 3 hours straight, that can get pretty exhausting. But she couldn't have been more on top of things, more energetic, and I really appreciated that.
Until next time, for Meet Me at the Movies, I am Noel T. Manning II. For Thomas Manning and for the entire cast and crew here, we thank you, and that's a wrap.
Many films to view until we meet again. Next time we see you, we'll gladly fill you in. We'll tell about the happy and the sad ones. We'll talk about the good ones and the bad ones. Many films to view till we meet again.